Hello and welcome to Bad Dog Comedy TV. It's live comedy on YouTube and you're watching the Fandom Show. Now give it up in the chat for the hosts of the Fandom Show. It's Kyah Green and Stephanie Malek.
Hello! Welcome to the Fandom Show, the show where we talk to our favorites about their favorites. I am your host, Stephanie Malek.
And I am also your host, Kyah Green.
And welcome to the second episode of the Fandom Show. So today's episode is all about everyone's both new and old favorite tabletop role-playing game, Dungeons and Dragons. It was originally designed by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson and published in 1974. If you've never played it, you've certainly heard of it or know somebody who plays it. Maybe you'll start a campaign after this episode. Who knows? Before we get into introducing our guests, I just want to do a quick fandom update from our last episode. So our last episode was about BTS, and we went in knowing nothing
Absolutely
about BTS.
Not a single thing.
And Kyah, would you like to give them the grand update?
Well, if you listened last time or watched last time, you'll know that I was embarrassingly bad at recognizing who was who in BTS, and I promised that I would get better, and as did Steph, and so I made the concerted effort the next day to cover my own shame and humiliation by learning all of their faces and names, and in doing so became utterly addicted to BTS.
Yes, we are both, thanks to that episode and thanks to Ann Pornell, we are both in too deep.
Yes.
We have biases now, we're learning dance moves.
So I guess what we're trying to tell you here is this show makes magic, and what you listen to here today could potentially change your life. Should we introduce our guests?
I would love to bring on our guests.
Yeah, okay. Then in that case, let's talk a little bit about our first guest, Kris Siddiqi. Kris Siddiqi is an award-winning comedian, if you can believe it, and an actor based in Toronto. He's an alumni of the Second City Toronto, creator and co-writer of the acclaimed CBC Gem series Bit Players, which is great. You should watch it. A voice actor in such kid cartoons as Hero Elementary, Monster Pack, and he can also be seen in the Amazon series The Boys and the Baroness Vaughn sketch show. That's so many good things, Steph.
And our other guest today is Sean Murray, who is a technician and improviser with the Bad Dog Theatre Company and who has played Dungeons and Dragons for over 30 years. He's currently playing D&D with, well, this isn't about Evident, the Fandom Show host, Kyah and Steph.
Hey, wait, that's
us. He's also a member of the acclaimed comedy troupe Sex T-Rex, with whom he has also played D&D. Connor was a wizard, Julian was a ranger, Katie was a druid, and John Blair joined in as a gnomish rogue. They were fighting zombies, and the deal was that you had to cut off their hands instead of their heads, but everyone was a bit too high to play. D&D's fun for everyone.
Yay!
So please welcome Kris Siddiqi and Sean Murray.
Yay!
Yay! We did
Yay!
it!
I can't hear anyone. Can you hear anyone?
Yay!
No.
Yay!
Okay, great. We love this
Yay!
for ourselves. Guys, how are you doing today? I'm going to figure out. Here we go. This is what happened.
Yeah, can you hear us now?
There you are. Hooray!
Yay!
Everything
We
works
did it.
better when you can hear people.
Yeah,
for sure.
What's up, guys? How you doing?
Doing good.
Oh, doing good. Doing good. I don't want to outdo Sean, but you know what? I say I'm on the
really
same
good?
level. I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
But ultimately, you're doing better than Sean, is what I get from that.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
Sean is one of the most even-keeled dudes I know. That man could command a ship
I'm
with his
like
just as...
Chris is at like apex neutral good, which is technically a purer good.
Yeah.
You know, than I'm sort of like lawful good, I guess.
That's right.
What a perfect way to
Already
introduce
jumping
that.
into it.
I love
it.
that. What would you say you are, Steph? Are you a good lawful good?
I am lawful good or neutral good, I think. I think I do what I think is right.
Right.
Whether or not that is what is lawful.
For those of you who don't know anything about D&D, what we're discussing right now is an alignment chart, which we will get into in a second. But first, let's talk about just D&D in general.
So
Okay.
tell us everything.
Okay.
Oh,
Catchy.
surprise! We have bumpers. They're made by Sean.
That was awesome.
So please tell us, how did you first get into Dungeons and Dragons?
Kris, do you want to go first? Do you want to take it?
Okay, I'll go first because I think it's a bit shorter than yours, and I'm looking forward to how you got into it. Because
Okay.
30 years, that's impressive. How did I get into it? Okay, so I got into it when I was a kid. I had, and I don't know how I had them, but I had the Gary Gygax Monster Manual and the Player's Handbook. I don't know how I had these things, and I didn't know how to play the game. Because as a kid, I'm flipping through them, and I'm seeing percentages, and ATK equals this, and I had no idea what... It was all math, right? And as a kid, math is stupid. So, but I had all the books, and I could see what bugbears look like, and boulettes, and stuff like that, right? So I was just so intrigued by this game. So I always knew what it was. And then I never really started playing. And, you know, Steph, you and I have gone on about how many role-playing games we've played and just our love of fantasy and role-playing. So it was only until, I'd say maybe 7-8 years ago, where a bunch of old, silly friends of ours, we got together at the Comedy Bar on Monday afternoons, and we would play. And friend Jack Mosshammer was a dungeon master, and Mark Andrada, and Matt Watts, and Dave Tomlinson, and Dave was a wizard, and Mark was a monk. And actually, the first time we played, I wrote my episode of my show and just based it off what we did that first time. I was like, I love this. I want to play. And it's also just a really great metaphor for life. Anyways, so I played with them, but we were playing an early edition. And then a few years go by, and our dear friend and one of my dearest loves of my life, Jay McCarroll, him and I go way back, and we're deep nerds. And randomly, he was just like, "Hey, Siddiqi, you ever played Dungeons and Dragons before?" And I was like, "I played a bit. He was like, "You wanna come join our table?" And I was like, "Yeah." So I went to his house, and the bug bit hard at his house. And then it's like we found our stride. We found our group. It was like the perfect musician kind of bonding. Oh, we're all jamming with each other perfectly. and then from there, it was just like Jay and I have called each other in the middle of the day to talk for hours about one or two D&D things.
Oh,
so
I love
it's just
that.
been a non-stop journey. We actually, to be really lame, Jay is over right now, and him and Aurora are outside on the deck. We were just talking about D&D, so I could come in to talk about D&D. Chances are I'm going to leave, and we're still going to keep talking about D&D. So that's my thing. Sean,
Yeah, I
beat
mean,
that.
yeah, I mean, in some ways, I don't know. Is my answer longer? I think it might be. It's hard to say, but like, yeah, that totally resonates with me. Like those friends that you have, that it's just like a conversation is always going to come to D&D at some point. Whether it's like, oh man, remember that time, like those like remember when stories, or just being like, have you seen the new whatever warlock subclass? Man, this could be pretty intense if you combine it with a halfling paladin or whatever. But, like, yeah, I started when I was a little kid. Like I was, I think, 6 years old when I started to play. So it was a game that my older brother was playing, and therefore was cool, sort of thing. And like I was playing an old edition. It was like when they first started to call it Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Like there was like basic Dungeons and Dragons, and then Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. This was all a part of second edition, I think.
Right.
And it had because in my experience of D&D, the game kind of mutated out of more board game type games like Hero Quest and like I mean, I'm too young for this, but games like Warhammer games and stuff like that. So yeah, I started playing D&D with my older brother and his buddy when I was 6 years old. I didn't really understand how any of it worked, but I was like, I'm going to be the guy from the Nintendo game Wizards and Warriors. And so
Amazing.
Made a fighter named Kruos and just tried to go up levels until I could get a panther because that was just like
That was
To
your
have
apex.
goals, you know?
yeah, and that's not something that fighters do, but like, you know, when you're playing with a 6-year-old, hopefully you make some concessions.
Speaking as a 40-year-old man, I just got a panther in my game last night because I'm a Beastmaster Ranger. So it
yeah,
all
you
comes
are.
full circle,
So-
pal.
Having a panther is never not cool, I think.
I know, right?
It doesn't matter what age you are.
Yeah.
But-
Or what
100%.
game you're playing, really. I mean, you could be playing Monopoly, and if you somehow manage to get a panther, I think it
Yeah.
would also
Yeah.
be rather cool.
Yeah.
That
right.
community
I'm the
chess
boot.
card
I'm the
would be
panther.
wild.
Yeah.
I guess like my arc from there is like I played it all through being a kid. I played it all through school. Like obviously in like high school when all of our schedules were all in sync was like the real sort of like crucible of D&D, and when we started to like really kind of role play because our little brains were starting to be like, let's have drama, you know, and we would have we had a pretty intense campaign going through high school that lasted like 2 years and had like 16 people involved in it, and was very epic. And then
So many people for D&D.
yeah, it was huge. And then I moved to Toronto and went into theater school, and since then I've mostly played D&D with like theater types, which is a very kind of different style experience if you've played with like D&D nerds going to playing with like theater nerds, because obviously D&D is a game with a lot of like sort of improv and acting aspects to it.
Yes.
So the type of game that you'd play with those people was very different, and a lot less cracking the manuals for.
Oh,
you know.
with those people. Ooh, heavy word shot.
Okay,
Tell my 4-year-old bedtime stories about Conan the Sumerian. Elon in the comments section.
so okay, you've both been playing for quite a while now. Those are both excellent, inspiring origin stories. I love it, and you've leveled up since then. See what I'm doing there? Those are D&D references.
Oh yeah, I'm on board, Kyah.
But some of the people watching this show probably haven't played any D&D at all. And I think a lot of people. I mean, we're gonna convince them otherwise, right? That's part of our job tonight. But what I think. A lot of people see this stuff on TV, either in like shows like Community or Stranger Things, and they kind of assess it as something that, like, you know, people do in basements with, you know, with their friends, but they don't do
Those people.
with those people. Exactly. So as people who have gotten into it in different ways, what are your favorite parts of D&D? Like, what are the things you use to like sell people on D&D when they ask about it?
Okay, I started last time. You go this time, Sean.
Yeah, I think this is a nerd. Like this is you're looking for this sort of deep nerd stuff here, so this is a nerdy answer. But like the answer I have is that like in D&D is a rare example of a type of storytelling where we have the opportunity to follow elements in a story that nobody wanted to happen. Because D&D has dice rolling in it, and like sometimes when you know when we have dramatic moments in D&D and we're excited about what might happen, like will we succeed, will we fail, or like and you know there are all kinds of levels of detail within that. And like in a story that's one person is writing and they're writing a book, or they're writing like, you know, or a bunch of people are writing and they're writing a TV show, we all decide on what we want to have happen, and then it happens. In D&D, we can have the dice tell us that something that we want to happen is just not going to happen, unless we just sort of decide that, like, okay, we're going to cheat, we're going to allow us to cheat here, sort of thing. But it can be really fun following where the unpredictable places that the dice tell us a story might go. Because now we have to deal with, like, okay, well, what happens when Darth Vader accidentally, like, nicks Luke's jugular in that lightsaber fight, and, like, oh, you didn't want to kill him, but they were fighting with swords, you know, things happen.
That's what the dice said. He rolled the 2.
One.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then they kissed. That was so weird.
Why did they kiss? He knows.
That was his sister.
He knows. But so I'm excited by that. Like, I think it's a very unique thing about D&D is that it can lead us down these interesting storytelling paths that are different from conventional storytelling that you see in a book or on TV or in movies.
Well, great answer.
I love that.
Great answer. Okay, Chris. No pressure, but that was a good
Okay.
answer.
So my thing, I really feel, I've also felt this resurgence of just board games in general, because not to talk out of school, but I believe we're all of the same generation, perhaps of the same age. So being kids of the 80s, we kind of grew up with that as our games, you know. Video games were slowly introduced into the household. Computers were introduced later on. But there was always something about a board game, and there's something very unique and just kind of simple about a board game, you know what I mean? So I think when games like Catan and stuff started coming back, there was this kind of thirst for this like retrospective kind of, you know, that's nostalgia, and that's that kind of nostalgia that we were looking for, and not in a material way or a experiential way on the big screen or whatever. It was more of just like, let's play games again with each other. And this was such a game that, Seann, I mean, you probably know every edition, 1 to 5 now, right?
I never was into first edition. I think it's probably before my time.
What a
But
noob.
nonetheless, you know a lot of the other editions of this game, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
yeah.
now me playing it at 5th edition and just going, okay, I know the rules now, and I mean, you guys know me. The one thing when I started latching on to D&D is we started Jay McCarroll's homebrew campaign, but Jay and I were like, we want to play more. We need to play more D&D. So we asked our friend Tom, could you dungeon master us? And he was like, I'll take you through. I'll take you through. Sorry, I'm looking for the campaign book because I have it, but I'll take you through one of the most well-known ones, the Ravenloft campaign, Curse of Strahd, and it's basically like Dracula Hunt. And then I was like, and that's when I chose my thing. So as a performer, and to your point, Seann, I think this is where it comes in. I looked at D&D as where a lot of people look at it as a gaming system, and you're sitting at a board and rolling dice. I was like, I want to play Gimli. I basically just want to be Gimli the dwarf. And so I found a voice and said, great, take me through a game with this character. My first ones was kind of just like me. I was like, I wanted to be Chris, but a thief and a rogue. But I was like, wait a minute. I love characters. This is the perfect game to be this character. So to sell it to someone, I would say that. It's like, you have to learn the rules, but when you do, it's the perfect board game / imagination time with your friends.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and like sort of furthering on that, like I think it's that idea of like if you're a board game nut and you play a lot of board games, eventually you're going to start attributing character to the elements of this board game beyond what exists on the board, right?
Yes.
And like that, I mentioned that like that's how I came to D&D through playing games like Hero Quest, which was essentially kind of beginner D&D.
Totally.
But like, you play it enough times and you start to just be like, oh, how is my like elf different than the elf that I had last time?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Well, and that's how the brain just starts to like role play. And I think it's an excellent point of like, yeah, you usually in D&D, your first character is going to be kind of just like, oh, what would I do in this situation?
Yeah.
Imagine I had a cloak and a short sword. How would I try to deal with this?
And you sound like yourself, and you feel a little, a little ashamed and a little embarrassed. Kind of like, well, no, Your Highness. But then you're like, no, I love this. And then you
Just fully
turn into a dark drow or something, and you keep that voice and that intention.
Yeah.
So but that's me. That's the way I play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a good point that like it's such a different game to different people, right? Like there are those people who fully play it as the numbers game, the like tabletop war game, and they're just like, oh man, green flame blade, man.
Yeah, man.
I
love those people. So okay, if you want to get really
Those
nerdy
people.
Oh, we're in. Let's do
Well,
it.
okay, so I love this now. So this is a deeper thing that Seann will know very well, but there are 3 types of like rule sets in Dungeons and Dragons, what they call raw, which is rules as written. So the rules as you'll find them laid out in the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Player's Handbook. Then there's what are the other 2? There's raw, there's
I don't know these distinctions that well, really, but I think you're talking about like stuff that's like kind of accepted homebrew. That's like you used to find it in Dragon Magazine, the magazine that like TSR would put out.
Dragazine.
Dragazine. They should have
No, that's
really
for Drag Race.
Yeah.
It has to be overlap. Anyway, please go on.
There's got to be. The fact that no one's like that we haven't seen the box of Dungeons and Drag Queens yet is crazy. But
I know,
A
right?
matter of time.
Yeah, but and then like there's sort of like straight up homebrew where like you at your table we're doing the rules like this. I've decided that XYZ is not fun in the game, so I'm going to change it or what have you. Or I've just decided that like I think these races are boring and I want to do something that's like more anime. So your race is like has bunny ears and it just gives you a +10 to charisma and you're just better than other characters or whatever.
Yeah. Aurora wanted to just be Buffy because she liked Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So she
Major respect.
made it. Yeah, right. And I was like, okay, well, Buffy is that sort of that motif in storytelling is like a paladin. She's a paladin, or like Obi-Wan Kenobi is a paladin, right? Like,
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Someone may have for my birthday made me a homebrew She-Ra D&D campaign and did like
Amazing.
character sheets for all the She-Ra characters.
That was
It's
me. I
fun.
did that.
Okay, so there's rules as written, then there's rules as intended. And the rules, this means the rules as how the designers intended them to work. And then there's I think it's ROC, and that's just the rule of cool.
Right.
If the rule of cool stands, then that's, if the coolest thing that you can come out with, like, no, I want to swing around the horse's neck and land on the saddle like Legolas, and you go, okay, I'm going to let that stand. That's great, because that's fucking cool.
That's
Just pure dopeness. Just let it go.
100%, man.
that's such a good indicator of like what kind of table you're at when if you'll be shut down with stuff like no, if you want to jump off the top of the wagon and make your attack as you're doing it, you're going to take D6 points of damage if you don't make your acrobatics check. It's like, okay, man, but like, wouldn't it be awesome?
Don't we all think that would be the best?
And that's what I love about it. That's where the storytelling element, where you don't have to, you can put out the proposition of this thing you want to do and go, we're going to let the dice decide. And the dice is that perfect decider. It's that random number generator that lets you know if it works or not.
Yeah, and that's like, as a kid playing, there's so many feelings of frustration when you're a kid and you're trying to like, this villain, you're not supposed to fight this villain yet. You're not supposed to do it. And the person's like, no, I shoot him in the eye with my crossbow.
Yeah.
Roll, and they roll the 20, and you're just like, well, okay.
Here
fine.
we are.
Here we are.
Guess you're never learning this lesson.
So that's a interesting segue. I'm curious, is there anything that you two don't like about D&D?
It's a tough question.
We're asking
Again,
you the hard
These
questions.
are the big
again,
ones.
you know?
it's such a different thing in different circumstances, and there are always moments of it that are troublesome. Like D&D as a game is just one of many role-playing games and one of many approaches to doing that. And like me being a nerd who's sort of gone through it for so many generations, that I could say like, oh, I don't like how in 5th edition you kind of need to get to 3rd level to get all your powers as a character, and that feels weird because like in theory, haven't I been a paladin all my life up until, or like at least for several years now, unless I'm like playing a teen or something.
Yeah, you've just been coasting for most of your life until this story started.
Yeah. And why did I suddenly gain the ability to always be able to talk to animals because I killed a few monsters in the woods? This doesn't make sense. But like, so there's elements of it that are like, these are goofy rules, or I like, we got to minimize this if we're trying to imagine reality or whatever. But I don't know about the experience. It's such a flexible experience that it's like, if there's something that you don't like about it, then just don't do that thing,
Yeah, really. Like, I don't know. I don't even know if I know enough about it to not like it. There's so much I don't know about it now. Like, they just wrote a book that's about the college experience. So if you're like
Strixhaven, right?
Yeah,
Is that
you go to a magic college and they've written rules on how to be like a hot mess at college. So that's what I love about it. I also, when I started coming into it, I just started sucking up everything. I loved everything about it. I guess with any kind of nerdy thing, the thing I don't like about it is this kind of sense of like, the originals who played it before, that's not D&D. One of the coolest things I thought I had seen right at the beginning was someone had designed a combat wheelchair for D&D, and I was like, that's ridiculous, but so is this whole game. So why wouldn't you have a awesome wheelchair?
That's wicked.
Yeah, I know, right? Like I saw one the other day that there was a bard, and they were playing their instrument, and their wheels were also like a strumming instrument. I was like, that's wicked. But then you see, as nerds do, we follow our favorite things on social media. But then I see all these streams of social media nerds kind of shitting on this thing of why, if it just, and this is where the whole idea of like negativity and nerddom, I just don't get it, because if everything's made up anyway, why does one thing matter than the other? Like if you have a pregnant dragon woman who's riding a panther, why does a wheelchair bother you? So I think, again,
question.
so just like any kind of thing that you love and respect, whenever those people come about that are a bit just holier than thou about it, I guess. I don't get that
Yeah.
attachment though to nerd things, you know?
It's such a weird thing too, because like in my experience of these nerdy narratives, like in video games and in fantasy and stuff, like usually the heroes are people who embrace all kinds of different people into their worlds, and they accept all kinds of different people into their worlds. And often that's like the thrust of the plot is like, let's learn to trust the people that we're supposed to have enmity towards or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you got these people who are like, this is what I love, but I am going to behave as a villain would in the stories that I love. Like,
It's very confusing.
like, do you not see that? Do you not see the sort of like the hypocrisy of that, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, it's also, this might be a dangerous thing to say, but there's also this new thing going about like making orcs more respectful.
Yeah, well,
And making the drow more respectful. And the drow are these
'cause it's
dark
just-
elves.
It's just a flat truth that like the game is racist. Like it
Well,
uses.
yeah, I mean, well, that's an interesting thing too, right? So this is where I'm going to get very philosophical about Dungeons and Dragons, where it's like, okay,
There we go.
the game had kind of racist roots, right? Like a bunch of old white dudes sitting around creating a game. Of course, it's going to have that, but at the same time, there's something I don't know, and maybe this is why I'm such a I like to verbalize my dumb opinions, but I like having a world where that exists. I don't know. Here's the other thing too. I think of monsters when I think of like orcs. I don't think of like a society. It's interesting that we superimpose that idea on something that's on a civilization of monsters. Like, hey, we should make them more respectable. Whereas we got so used to just slaying monsters in Lord of the Rings and everything else, right? So it's just these new interpretations that come up, which is really interesting, which doesn't mean we can't have everything, right? I like a little goblin racism in my games, okay? I guess that's what I'm saying.
It's such a weird balance because like so many like action-based properties, like our heroes who are supposed to think are good people are going to murder hundreds, if not
Other good
thousands,
people, probably, yeah.
of like of thinking creatures, like because that's just the way that the game
That's
is built.
the way the
like,
game is.
It's part of the fun, in theory.
Yeah,
It's part of the fun, and I think that's also it's part of the beauty of bringing our world into this fantasy world is that you can have a conversation with a troll, but then kill it at the same time, or you can meet a civilization of orcs and go, these people are garbage,
and it can
and
come
choose
back
to burn the whole thing down or save them.
And it can kind of come back to where we started with that concept of the alignment wheel, because like in the fictional world of Dungeons and Dragons, where someone is like verifiably evil, like you can like poke them and check the litmus paper and be like that's evil. And you can say like, okay, well, you know, we got orcs and they're just all evil. That's just the deal. Except for obviously we want to tell stories about the rare ones that aren't or whatever.
Right.
But like, it's just like, okay, well, it's fine to kill things that are evil. Or is it? Or do we believe in redemption? Do we want to try to like take prisoners?
Yeah.
The classic D&D like moral dilemma of the goblin prisoner who now we've got this guy to talk. We just murdered all of his companions. Like in hot blood, we murdered all of his companions. But now this, like, the DM has to play this little goblin, and he's given him a little cute voice, and now we have to be like, okay, I slit his throat, and it's like, that feels bad now. Now it feels bad to do it.
Yeah.
Well, he's got a cute little voice.
Yeah.
We'll kill him. What do you both think about the alignment chart?
I think it's really great. I think just as a kind of just a guide in and of itself is really great. If you're a performer or improviser or writer even, that's a great handy thing to have.
I was going to say, for anyone who might not know, the alignment chart is when you're creating your Dungeons and Dragons character, there's 9 different spots on it. There's lawful good, neutral good, chaotic good, and then lawful neutral, true neutral, chaotic neutral, and then the evil versions of those.
Yeah, it's basically
You get
like
the idea.
there are sort of it's like there are 2 axes that you exist on. One is the axis of good and evil, and the other is the axis of law and chaos.
Right.
And it's an interesting idea of like your respect for sort of the establishment doesn't reflect how good or evil you are. Of like, you know, your traditional example is like Robin Hood is chaotic good, because like Robin Hood doesn't respect the laws of the local area because he believes those laws are evil.
Right. And then I always like using like Darth Vader is lawful evil because he follows the rules, but he kind of just destroys anything that's in his path.
Yeah, doesn't care about what suffering gets wrought, and is really just climbing the ladder for his own personal power.
Yeah, he's part of the machine. Yeah.
In fact, if you are a fan of any property, any fictional property, you can probably Google that property plus alignment chart, and you will see probably hundreds of versions of people having put these characters into this alignment chart. Worth doing.
You can find it for anything.
Anything
Oh,
at
it's
all.
great. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Are there any just classes of D&D characters that you will not play? Do you have any where you're like, nah, man, that sucks. It always sucks.
Or any that you love to play, just
Yeah.
to keep it in the positive too. Like any that you're like, I will play this every time. I love me a fighter. I love me a paladin, whatever it is.
I'll tell you, I love me a paladin. I started these 2 new characters.
Called
It was because I was playing this dwarf, and I was a paladin, and I was this dwarf, right? But and then I was like, I want to play something completely different. So then I played a Goliath barbarian. I basically just wanted to be Conan, and he was this giant, and I loved him, and he was so different because I could realize going with my DM, I was like, I just want to like Gerard Butler 300 kick this guy off the platform. I don't want to attack him. And he was like, okay, so roll this. And then I started, I'm so strong. I can punch through things and I don't need a fucking weapon. I'm going to pick up a stone and throw it at these guys. So that was really, and then I made this monk, and a lot of people shit on the monk, right,
That's
Sean?
true.
I'm not wrong there.
I mean, they're fools. They're fools to do this. Stunning attack will take down your big bad real quick.
I've
Well,
seen
I'm-
it happen.
Yeah, I made a feline monk, so I was like a cat monk.
Oh,
Nice tabaxi.
Tabaxi monk, yeah. And because then I chose all the Tabaxi racial traits and put them with the class traits.
Ooh, sneaky.
Yeah, exactly.
That
So-
dexterity.
Oh, dude, you don't even know. You don't even know.
I don't. I don't. You're right.
But you know what? There are so many classes I haven't played yet that I'm like, I haven't played a bard, and at first I was like, a bard, but now I'm like, oh, a bard,
do a bit of everything.
100%. Yeah,
It's true.
So
There's upsides to bards. I've played them.
yeah. Side note: I wanted to create a campaign where it's a party of bards, and they're running away from like the local town that they just did a show in, and just call the campaign "Band on the Run."
Please cast Chris Wilson in that.
Yeah.
I want to see him play it.
He's got some bard experience.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Not sure it would serve him in any way, but
No, but it's entertaining.
yeah, I don't know. I don't play as much as I DM, so there aren't like I don't have a ton of like PC experience behind me. I guess like I either play like a very vanilla and similar to myself character, or I go completely apeshit and make a very weird character. So I'm making a character now for a campaign I'm about to start with the guy who I played D&D with when I was 6 years old, incidentally.
What?
Your brother?
No, a friend of his, Chris Bourne, not in the comedy community.
great.
You wouldn't know him. But my character for this one is going to be a bard paladin multi-class.
Okay.
Who's an illithid, but he's an illithid who's suffering from partialism. So he's a Githyanki, right? One of the mortal enemies of the illithid that was a slave to the illithid for many years until his brain was eaten by them. But his personality survived, and now he's in the body of the illithid, and he's fighting against his oppressors. And he's like uses his bard thing psychically.
He's a Githyanki, but he's in the body of the illithid.
Illithid, yeah. Illithid, the mind flayers are
Whoa.
like the octopus-faced. They're one of the sort of iconic D&D monsters. They got
Yeah,
10
they're very Lovecraftian kind of with their
Lovecraftian,
things,
yeah.
and they
Full
created the
octopus
Githyanki.
They did, yeah. And through years of slavery.
Yeah.
And but the deal is that they like lay little eggs, and the eggs like Commander Kirk into your brain and eat your brain and replace your personality. But sometimes it goes wrong.
Okay, can I ask Sean a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Of course
Yeah.
you can.
What do you? Because there are also these people. What do you rather? Do you rather DMing or playing?
I mean I like to DM, and I
And
do
is
it.
phenomenal at it.
Very, very
really,
good.
just for
yes.
the record. Phenomenal
Absolutely.
DM.
Yeah, and I do it way more often than I play. But yeah, I love like DMing is super fun. You get to build the world, you get to watch people's reactions to the fun little like emotional roller coasters that you set up for them, and stuff like that. Steph knows.
I have a very emotional character in our campaign, and boy, he gets put through the ringer.
There's a lot of emo pop punk involved.
Yeah,
Simple Plan does come
I'm airing
up
your dirty
regularly.
laundry stuff. This is what's happening.
I love incidentally that speaks to like I love making the soundtrack when we're doing D&D, like building the atmospheric soundtrack out of like video game music and pop music references and stuff like that.
I think that was my most fun time, Sean, at the old place when you and I could step off stage and connect. Oh, was that from The Witcher?
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh,
it was.
yes.
I am
love that
also
Witcher
I'm the
soundtrack.
sound designer for our D&D games too. So
nice.
I take very huge pride in that and really digging deep and going, oh, what soundtrack can I pull for more battle music? Or now we're about to play. There's a new campaign called Icewind Dale: Rime of the Frost Maiden, and it takes
the one
place
with
in
the
the
owl
most
on the front?
northerly part of the Sword Coast. And so I was like, you know what? In this one, I don't want to do like old fantasy Skyrim Witcher music. I want to like do like a Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross kind of weird synthy kind of vibe to that.
Yeah, a little girl with the dragon tattoo kind of soundtrack.
Totally.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Look up Nine Inch Nails Ghosts. That's got some great background stuff.
Okay, I've been using the Watchmen soundtrack from the HBO.
That's a good one.
That's really good.
Very good. See, I feel like this is just, and this is probably going to bring us into the next part of our show. I feel like this is just like a really, really good example of the fact that there really is no wrong way to play D&D. Like, if you're playing it in a cinematic way, you're playing it the right way. If you're playing it for the numbers, you're playing it the right way. But then, with that said, there are still the occasional nerds who just make a point of making sure that everyone else knows that they're playing it the wrong way.
That's what I'm talking about.
Which is why, unfortunately, right now we have to move on to the worst segment of the show.
Awful.
Here comes the Gatekeeper.
Well. Couldn't help over here and you guys talking about Dungeons and Dragons. Well, I mean, you were mostly talking about 5th edition. I don't know if I'd call that Dungeons and Dragons.
Jeez.
The game's over the past 30 years, the game's gotten too easy. It's really lost its roots. I typically play Chainmail, the original game from 1971. I'm sure you guys know what Dungeons and Dragons based off. Yeah, that's mostly what I play. Hyper-realistic setting, by the way. We average about 4 or 5 player deaths per 12-hour session. It's no, I heard you guys mention the rule of cool. Not for me. By the book.
It's really important to know how many cubits of wood your character can carry.
Exactly. I mean, carry weight's a thing. I mean, sometimes I hear people playing games when I'm at the comic book store, just arguing with the clerk over the cost of comic books, and I hear people carrying multiple weapons. That's not realistic. No, you gotta, carry weight's a thing, people. If your strength is below 16, you get 1 weapon. That's my rule.
Yeah. Numbers are so fun, eh?
Yo, my favorite. I mean, math and killing people? I mean, what's a better combination?
Numbers in a very specific angle on medieval history.
Exactly. I mean, you're a dungeon master. The dungeon master's job is to kill the players and make sure they have to create a new one next week, and that's what I set out to do.
Filipe, clearly you're very interested in, as a gatekeeper, you're very interested in very realistic games. Do you DM any games?
Yeah. Like I mentioned, I currently DM a hyper-realistic setting right now. We average a few player deaths per 12-hour session. Low magic, too. Like, it's just not realistic having so much magic. In my games, it takes about 6 months to learn a first-level spell.
About how much time in the game is devoted to finding water?
Most of it, yeah. I'd say if the players go a while without telling me they've had a drink or eaten, they're likely to pass out during combat of dehydration or the sort. So I don't give them reminders. I just, when it happens, I say, hey, your player's passing out from dehydration right now. And we lost a few dozen players that way, yeah. If any of you want to join my session, I'm always looking for new players. A lot of them have to keep canceling for some reason.
Oh yeah, I'm super curious what it is to sit at your table. I'm a very laissez-faire player, so I don't pay attention to wood or time or
Buckle in.
a lot of
I mean,
montages.
It sounds
in my
like
world.
it sounds like you don't know a lot about. You're probably not even a real D&D fan. It sounds like. I mean, you probably don't even know the only spell that could block magic missiles.
What about anti-magic missile?
I think you're
Sounds
surprising.
like a homebrew.
He's
Sounds like a homebrew.
surprisingly close to correct. I mean, anti-magic shell will stop magic missiles, but shield is probably what you're looking for.
Shield. Yeah, there you go. Okay, someone knows their stuff. Okay.
Sorry, I was
did
thinking
you-
of Baldur's Gate 2, which you actually do have a spell called anti-magic missile, which is in the Faerun world in the
Right.
land of the Forgotten Realms.
Oh,
Yeah,
a
might have-
spin-off game. Okay. Next thing you're gonna tell me you play Pathfinder too.
It's too many numbers for Pathfinder.
Filipe, is there a barrier to like what is the initiation for your game to get in as a player?
Well, I have players create about 9 or 10 characters, since most of them will die during the first session. And then I want at least a 30-page backstory on each one, full family tree, and then I just give them a few quick tests of the system, make sure they know what they're talking about. Nothing I hate more than waiting for a player to decide what they're going to do. I mean, it's painful. You need to know the history of the world. I mean, if your character exists in that world, like for example, one thing I love to ask people is, what year is it currently in Dungeons and Dragons as of the last release?
I mean, in which campaign setting?
The most recent, Descent into Avernus. What year?
I'm
does
sure
it
you
take
could
place
name
in?
the campaign setting, right?
Yeah, Descent into Avernus.
I mean, that's
That came out a
that's like
while ago.
That's like
if
a
you wanna do
module,
that
though,
one.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're probably talking about
it's the most
Forgotten
recent
Realms,
one.
right?
It's the most recent one. Yeah.
Gatekeeper, I feel like they're showing you up a little, bud.
No, I'm still in control.
Well, I'll tell you. I mean, what Avernus you're looking for? I mean, that was sometime in I believe it's 1494. It starts. That's sort of the current.
Okay,
setting,
lucky
right?
guess. Lucky
Okay,
guess.
Do you want the year of the spell plague? What do you
No,
want?
that's
Do you want the-
okay.
But
I
I mean-
definitely know that.
And Avernus has been the first layer of Beator for a long time now.
That's definitely a thing I know.
Ribcage
One of
is-
the 9 hells. Come on, Philly.
Yeah,
Yeah, classic.
Ribcage, the gate town in the Outlands, is about to slip in, apparently. But so far, Dis, the pit fiend that rules Avernus, has been holding on.
Yeah,
Philippe,
absolutely.
what do you do for a living?
Mostly buy and sell comic books, and
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time down at ANC Games, just making sure only real nerds spend time in there.
Yeah.
I didn't know they sold comic books at ANC Games.
Well, you have to make a big stink about it, but they'll sell you some.
Are you less of an employee and more of a volunteer at AMC Games, Philippe?
I'd say a public servant more so.
Yeah, cool,
Make
cool,
sure
cool, cool.
only.
Do they
real-
ask you to maybe not come back tomorrow? kind of
Not so
thing?
much ask, more get legal documentation stating.
Yeah. Okay.
But
Okay.
but I still, I'm a tabletop gamer. I come in with a disguise, a little thing.
What do you think about wheelchairs in Dungeons and Dragons?
I don't like any homebrew. All has to be out of the book.
I feel
If you
like
can't-
that's the most realistic thing you can put in Dungeons and Dragons.
no. So someone
Yeah,
in Dungeons
I mean,
and Dragons
With
No.
with realistic injury rules, I'm sure your characters are probably getting like their legs
Well,
injured pretty frequently. So-
They get left behind. That's or spend 6 months studying a first level heal spell. That's,
Well, I play no Ranger Left Behind. Okay, that's the way my games run. So
Well, here's one more thing for you guys. I mean, you sound like pretty low level players. So why don't you tell me, with an armor class of 5 and 1 hit point, what's the weakest, feeblest creature in Dungeons and Dragons?
I mean, 5th edition is probably a child or a commoner.
like a rat, maybe.
Yeah,
A rat,
or like
yeah.
a
rat with its
sturge,
10 armor
maybe?
class. Yeah, okay. No, it's of course the gas spore. You guys never encountered a gas spore? I let out a few gas
A gas spore is certainly not the weakest creature. You're talking about like the beholderkin that like explodes into poison gas.
Yeah.
Or looks like a beholder to like discourage creatures from
Oh,
attacking it in the
it's-
Underdark.
It can kill you after, but it's got really low armor class, so
Yeah, that's
you
that's
can fuck
true.
it up.
But I would still rather take on the rat.
I mean,
Philippe, I think you might have been wrong about
no,
that.
no,
I think you
no,
might have
I'm
been
never
wrong
wrong.
about that.
I'm never
Philippe
wrong.
was
So
wrong.
I'm disconnecting.
Oh,
that's
we
so
defeated the gatekeeper.
Ba 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 ba.
Ba, 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 ba.
Yes, you guys defeated the gatekeeper.
You did it.
Gatekeepers are the worst.
Gatekeepers
Hey,
are the
you
worst,
guys
and we
use
don't like
iMovie
them.
too?
Yeah.
Actually, all of these fun bumpers made by Sean Murray, the one and only.
Meow, 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 meow.
It's good that you did that too, because I was about to roll for it to see if we could defeat him, and I'm not entirely confident that that would have worked.
Fair, very fair.
It might have been that I rolled a 1 and he got to talk for the rest of the
Oh
show.
God!
So.
Thank goodness we didn't
It's-
leave it to chance.
It's funny that Philippe mentions like chainmail, though. I do still have like my mom played like D&D when she was younger, and I still have one of the like old like 70s rule books. Like it's not D&D, but it's like I think it's called like Sword and Sorcery or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just hilarious to read the rules that they've got in there of like this is the stuff that they felt like would be important for you to know.
Yeah.
Do you have an
I mean,
example?
it's the first version of the game. You know, we have to look at the very first editions of Dungeons and Dragons the way we look at Super Mario Brothers. The most basic, square, 90-degree angled.
Yeah, it's like the
it's-
Old Testament.
It's sort of strange. It's strangely the opposite, though, right? Because it's like over time the game has become much more like palatable, where in the past it was very arcane in terms of like the rules were very different depending on what kind of character you were and stuff. Like even when I started playing, it was like, oh, you're a dwarf and a paladin. Like you can only get up to level 10 because
Right.
that's weird for you to be
Yeah.
a dwarf and a paladin. So you're not allowed to get up to the higher levels. And it's like, what?
Another
Why is
weird
that
old
fun?
rule, you'd roll initiative every single time.
What?
Every round, yeah.
Every round you'd roll
Oh,
initiative.
that sounds exhausting.
Oh.
So, it just...
say nothing
just
of-
flies all over the place.
Just to say nothing of Thaco, like that's kind of a legend of weird game design in the old ones, where everybody would have a score that was your Thaco, which was 2-hit armor class 0. And it's
Right.
like, okay, my Thaco's 11 and their armor class, like Philippe said, is 5. So I need because it's 11 to hit 0, so you count up from that. And there was armor classes that were -2, and you'd count down from
Yeah.
that. And it's like, oh boy, what a pain.
Sounds like so much fun.
Yeah, you can kind of see why like it wasn't very accessible to a large
Yeah.
swath of people. You really had to do the work to want to play it at a certain point.
You had to do the work, and those people had fun. And then, I mean, something we never even mentioned was the Satanic Panic in the 80s.
Oh, right. The like chick
yeah.
tracks and stuff. Yeah.
And how, Dungeons and Dragons was to that as what Harry Potter was to, like, the New Age kind of people who were clutching
the
the
wizards,
pearls
the
over
witches.
magic and demonic whatever. And,
Yeah.
and I mean, the classic made-for-TV movie Mazes and Monsters with Tom
Which is
Hanks.
available on YouTube, by the way.
It is?
Yes,
Full.
it
I have
is.
it saved. We'll watch it later. The full video is available on YouTube.
I mean, it's fantastic. Aurora and I watched it, and we were more blown away with the guy who essentially invented LARPing. The guy was like, I want to play D&D in real life. Let's play in this cave system I found. And he set up all this elaborate stuff. I was like, this guy's LARPing, man.
And now you can LARP wherever you want. You can also play D&D in a castle. The world is bananas right now. It's
The world
wonderful.
is bananas. I love it.
Speaking of just like wild things that exist out there, that brings us to our next segment, which is Fandom Finds.
And it binds.
Yeah. So this segment is where we basically have gone through the internet and found a bunch of stuff to show you, for you to comment on. So this first one is an old ad for Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
I guess trying to get Jesse Eisner, as you
Eisenberg?
commented, Eisenberg to play D&D.
Yeah,
Any
for those
thoughts?
who are listening to this as a podcast, it's like a guy leaning against a wall. The guy looks, in my personal opinion, like the spitting image of Jesse Eisenberg. And there's a bunch of kids in a kitchen behind him, and it reads, "Who needs to hang around? I've got Dungeons and Dragons," which I would argue is hanging around.
Yeah, I think that's the ultimate form of hanging around.
This kid behind him who's playing D&D in his sports jersey doesn't even get a chair.
I know. Also, they're playing on the smallest table.
They're
in the
playing
world,
on like a kitchen island.
yeah, what the... I will say though, that white kid in the overalls, I feel exactly like him, man. God damn
Yeah.
right, I'm playing D&D. I'm gonna pop my foot on the wall and hang out.
Yeah, my dirty ass sneakers.
Yeah,
Yeah, he
man.
looks like he's holding a skateboard, but is in fact holding a player handbook.
He's the James Dean of Dungeons and Dragons.
100%.
Oh, so he's famous in the fandom. I can see.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were a lot of these old ads, and like it's really hard to make a compelling ad for Dungeons and Dragons. I remember back when like World of Warcraft was huge, and like in comic books there was an ad going around forever that was just like this kid lit up with a blue light of his computer screen, and the tagline was, "If you're gonna spend 8 hours pretending you're an elf, why not do it with friends?"
It's true,
Like
man.
that would work on me though. I'd be like, you're right.
Yeah.
I should do this with
I
other
should
people.
make some friends.
And then I'll spend 16 hours just skinning animals.
It is funny though when
Yeah.
you make friends through imagination, and then you have to talk to those imagination friends in real life.
Yeah.
They go, hey, so
How's it going?
what do you do for a living?
I love that belt you made. That
Yeah.
was sick.
Oh, you're married. Oh, wow, cool. Yeah.
Your character isn't married, so that surprises
Yeah.
me.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
wow, you chose something so different.
Wow.
I'm sure that's the conversation they're having.
There.
As I'm sure that's what's going on here.
Oh, the
Should we move
kids
on
at the
to
kitchen island? Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the next one. Let it roll. So this is a phenomena called dice shaming. If you have seen this on the internet, our
Okay.
guests. But if you haven't seen it on the internet, for those who wouldn't look for this is a phenomenon that people are taking the dice that they rolled and then writing on a piece of paper the result of that roll, usually a 1 or a terrible dice roll, and they'll write on a piece of paper what happened because they rolled that dice.
Yeah, so this one here, if you're listening, I made my owner get seduced by a tree. Not a special tree or anything, just a tree. And it's a dice with a 1.
Yeah, it's like the dog shaming
I was
thing.
right. The dog shaming thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could probably do a whole episode on people's superstitions around their die rolls and stuff. Like how people think like a die might have only a certain number of high rolls in it for an evening, so you're
Wow, really?
Yeah.
you're like-
Oh, God.
Some of
I'm
us
not
have
rolling
smudged our
hot
dice, it's
tonight.
fine.
well the line of like, oh man, I wasted that 20 on my initiative or whatever.
We've done that.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Have you ever done any of those things, like put your dice in the freezer or like smoked them or any of those things, cleansed them anyway? Steph is raising her hand.
Anything
Steph
helps.
smokes her dice, man.
I'm gonna do it after this too. I mean, that is a part of my D&D games too, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
You know. So this is an option if you're rolling poorly. Let's see the next one. Let her roll.
Right. Dice.
So this
have
is
to
a
explain.
meme with the pyramid, the hierarchy of needs, self-fulfillment needs, psychological needs, basic needs, and upon it is just written a big in
like MS Paint.
MS Paint dice. Do you guys buy a lot of dice? Like, do you collect that stuff a lot?
Not dice, because I have so many. I mean, I just have a case of dice sitting on my desk. And
in
I
case.
always want to. I want to buy every D&D thing I see. I want to own it all, but I just can't. I can't. More dice? I don't need more dice.
You have to draw a line.
I have to draw a line.
Yeah, I'm the same. Maybe because of the DM thing. Like, I feel like players like to have, like, this is my set of dice for this character or whatever. But, like,
Yeah.
I just have a, like, accumulation of 30 years of people leaving dice at my house.
Lucky.
So you just have like a lost and found of
Yeah,
dice.
essentially.
Someone
It's
comes over once, it's like,
awesome.
wait, what the fuck?
Yeah, that happens for sure.
It is
This
fun
is
to have
my
dice as your
diamond
character.
D20.
Look, some of us have those. They're very important.
They
to
do.
us.
Yeah,
They do
fair
make
enough.
them out of some strange materials too, like ivory. I've heard of ivory ones. I've heard of wood ones. I've
yeah,
heard of
amethyst.
like steel ones. I've heard of
Bone.
like
Yeah.
yep.
Bones.
Bone dice
alligator-
is pretty hardcore.
That's
alligator
pretty
jawbone.
Rolling
What?
those bones, man. Yeah.
Roll those bones.
I've heard of that.
Yeah.
What? Speaking of rolling, let it roll. Next one.
So this is a meme. It's got a picture of a guy covered in blood. It says, "My party. No one has to get hurt. We'll just sneak past the guards. And then my party 5 minutes later." And it's a gentleman head to toe in blood. Thoughts as DMs and players?
When people get involved in the power fantasy of Dungeons and Dragons, there's a type of person who just really wants to, f the police, and so they're gonna create some trouble, and they're gonna kill some guards.
There's a term for people who just want to play D&D and just kill things. It's called a murder hobo. Everything all right? You guys okay? Did you spill everything?
Yeah,
on your computer?
I flipped a pen.
Okay.
I got excited.
Yeah.
Unremarkable.
Murder.
But you can be a
hobo.
murder hobo if you just want to run around and kill absolutely everyone. That's what
right.
you're known as.
And in theory, in this scenario, it also could have been a poor roll, right? Like a stealth roll. I know we've had a moment that I tell people all the time that might be just funnier
glorious
to
moment.
me than it is to other people. Of somebody in our campaign trying to give a thumbs up and rolling so poorly on it that we ended up in a gigantic battle that we had a lot of trouble winning.
Very high level
Amazing.
person we were against. It was awesome.
So, sometimes
beautiful.
that can happen, right?
Yeah,
All
it's
right.
the sort of thing I was talking about before. Of like, nobody wanted this. Nobody asked for this.
Here we are, and we'll deal with it, and we'll end up almost dead.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one more.
Yeah, let's do one more.
Let's do it up.
Let it roll.
Nope.
I'm just gonna...
Oh. Okay, so this is something I found. It's made by Mattel, and it was a Dungeons and Dragons handheld game from like the early 80s. Also, it looks like someone drew a penis on it.
I mean, naturally. It's somebody's handheld game from the early 80s.
Yeah. Any thoughts on like these weird trying to sell editions of things that have nothing to do with the franchise? Like this is clearly, I don't know, man. It's
Some
just
kind of weird maze simulator or something. Yeah.
I guess.
This apparently has everything. If it's trademark, this has to be the
Oh, yeah.
glorious minds at Dungeons and Dragons that say, "Hey, we should
get into this.
yeah."
I guess like the popcorn thought it gives me is just the sort of like video games, of course, owe so much to Dungeons and Dragons in their like sort of content, monsters, and sort of character designs. It's just weird
Just in
nowadays.
the way they work, absolutely.
Yeah, the way they work and stuff. Like, it's weird that those video games are called role-playing games in my head. It's like, how much of a role-playing game is this really when you don't have the interaction of another brain that's like interpreting your choices and stuff like that? I mean, some games are able to do it better than others, but it's just become a weird. It's become a weird term that has that's lost some of its meaning, I guess.
It's a bit of a catch-all term, isn't it? Yeah, because there are times like when Jay and I talk about that in a video game, you can feel the walls, you could push on the walls of the places where you can't go, but in Dungeons and Dragons, wherever you want to go, whatever you want to do, is doable.
Yeah, well, it might take a session to plan for it, but we can come up with anything.
Yeah.
This game seems to be entirely about pushing on the walls.
Very literally.
This is also the funny thing about Dungeons and Dragons. Like, they're making a movie of Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm thinking, how do you make a movie of that? Because there's so many
it's so
different levels. Do you make a movie about the world it's set in? Or, which I would do you make a world about the random strangers or the group of friends who come together and play the game and how they work out their life through this game dealing with each other? Because that's what Dungeons and Dragons is.
Yeah, that would be an interesting story for sure. I mean, we see it in like these little one-offs a lot of the time, like, but a whole story dedicated to it would be interesting.
Yeah.
I'd love to see what they do with that, and maybe once it comes out, we'll touch base again. That's the end of our segments. Thank you so much to Sean Murray and Kris Siddiqi. Where
for
can
having
people
us.
find you if they want to talk to you about Dungeons and Dragons? Anything you want to plug?
Oh, man, you can find me in the East End. I live at, my address is,
No, wait, no.
no, okay. Oh, sorry. I do that too much.
You
I
don't
give away
want
too much. Find me on Twitter, Instagram, I guess. Yeah, listen
TV
to
shows.
TV show. I got a mini series on CBC
Hell yeah, you
called
do.
Schitt's Creek. It's a few seasons of
It
it.
was Dan Levy, everyone.
Yeah. And thank you for having me. And but most importantly, for all 100 170,000 people watching, I need you to go to and listen to our Dungeons and Dragons podcast and let us know if it's any good.
What's it called?
It's called Critical Role. My name is Matt Mercer.
Oh, of course, yes.
Oh yeah.
It's
Sorry.
called
I
Dwarven
introduced you
Moss.
wrong before.
And little story, it's called Dwarven Moss because that's what our characters roll and smoke in the Sword Coast. That's our strain of weed is Dwarven Moss.
Oh my goodness! I'll ask you more about this strain later.
Yeah,
I'd love to find out.
That I feel speaks strongly to the type of campaign you are running, and I desperately want to go listen to that now.
And Sean, where can people find you?
Yeah, well, it makes sense to throw people, if they're watching this or listening to this, towards D&D Live, which is also part of the Bad Dog Comedy Theater. Steph's rocking some merch from it right now. And yeah, we're doing a show for the next 4 weeks on Mondays at 9 p.m. So come tune in to that because it's a goofy time that has precious little to do with Dungeons and Dragons.
But so much to do with Snapchat filters, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of Snapchat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of a loose version.
It's
of
inspired by.
A lot of characters found through Snapchat filters, I'm sure. Yeah.
Just ask Liz Johnston.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, it's
You're
very
not
much.
wrong.
It's very much the seduced by a normal tree style of D&D.
Right, yeah.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Thank
love
you
it.
so much. If you are enjoying the show, reach out to us, follow us, compliment us, don't insult us on social media. I'm at Stephanie with a PH _ Malek, Malek.
And I'm at the Kyah Green. There are multiple. I'm the best. It's TheKyah and green like the color.
And you can check out our gatekeeper, who may be continuing that at Filipe Dimas, or he streams often on Twitch as Folopo. Tune in next Tuesday, July 27th, for the Fandom Show Lord of the Rings edition.
Lord of the Rings.
With Molly Knox Ostertag, who I am a fangirl about. She wrote The Girl from the Sea, The Witch Boy, strong female protagonist. These books. Oh,
a hell of a lot of excellent Sam and Frodo.
It's gonna be pretty gay.
It's gonna be pretty gay. So the theme to this show today was Sparkle Mountain by Andrew Wong. You should go check him out. Tech was by Connor Lowe. Bumper was by the one and only Sean Murray, who is right up there. And this has been produced by Bad Dog Theater and Cardboard Sword Collective.
For a full list of upcoming episodes, visit bagdogtheater.com / the Fandom Show. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much.
Keep loving the things you love and tell everyone about them.
Yay.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.